9 years ago, my 61-year-old second uncle remarried just a year and a half after becoming widowed. His new wife was a 51-year-old divorced woman. In these 9 years of remarriage, he thought he would enjoy a happy life with a younger wife. However, less than 5 years into the marriage, he regretted it. He wanted a divorce but couldn't leave. Why was my second uncle in such a hurry to remarry? Why did he choose a wife 10 years younger than him? The truth is, he had his own selfish reasons. First, he had gotten used to being taken care of by his late wife. He hurried into remarriage just to have someone to continue taking care of him. Second, having a younger wife meant she was not only more attractive but also healthier, physically and mentally, and could take care of him for longer, unlike his first wife, who passed away early. Lastly, his new wife had a son and a daughter, while my second uncle only had a daughter who had married far away. He thought that having a wife with a son would give him more security in his old age. This new wife of his, whom I'll refer to as my second aunt, wasn't well liked by our family. It was clear to everyone that she wasn't genuinely interested in my second uncle. She was more interested in his money. My second uncle was a retired mine worker, and while he wasn't particularly wealthy, he had a monthly pension of 3,800 yuan. Additionally, he owned a piece of land, about 100 square meters, where he had already built a decent little house in our hometown. Life was pretty good for him, with minimal burdens since his only daughter lived in another city. When my second uncle decided to marry this woman, many of our relatives advised him not to make such a foolish decision. At his age, remarriage seemed unnecessary, and he would have been better off enjoying his life alone, maybe even selling the land and buying a small house near his daughter. But my second uncle was captivated by this younger woman and insisted on marrying her. Even his daughter tried to intervene, but he wouldn't listen, and within 2 months, they registered their marriage, and she moved into his home. At first, my second uncle enjoyed his remarried life. My second aunt was capable and handled all the household chores. She was also a great cook, and my uncle relished the meals she prepared. Plus, her son had recently graduated from college and secured a respectable government job in a nearby city. This gave my uncle comfort, as he thought he now had a son to rely on in his old age, along with a wife to take care of him. However, after remarrying, my second uncle started to neglect his own daughter. His daughter had originally planned to invest in the family land and build a 3-story building that could be used for both business and living. She proposed that the first floor be rented out as a shop, and the second and third floors be used as apartments, which could be either rented or lived in, thus generating more income from the land. But my second uncle dismissed her idea, thinking that a daughter who had married out was of little use compared to his new wife's son. In the 3rd year of their marriage, my second aunt convinced my uncle to use his money and land to help her son build a house. My uncle contributed 120,000 yuan, while her son took out loans to cover the remaining 400,000 yuan needed to build the house. The property was registered in her son's name, with the promise that he would take care of my second uncle in his old age. My second uncle naively believed that giving the land to his stepson would lead to a better life. However, instead, he became nothing more than a cash cow for his new family. He gave them his money and land, but got nothing in return. 5 years ago, when her son's wife had a child, my second aunt moved in with them to help care for the baby, leaving my uncle alone at home. She promised that once they saved enough money to buy a house in the city, they would bring him to live with them. But when they eventually bought a second-hand house, there was no room for my uncle. Even my second aunt's daughter lived there, but my uncle was only allowed to stay for a night or 2 on the couch before being sent back to his old home. Back in the village, my uncle's new house didn't even belong to him. The rent from the shops went straight to my second aunt, who said it was for paying off her son's loan. From the 5th year of their marriage, after my second aunt moved to the city and left my uncle alone, he began to deeply regret remarrying. He had hoped for a happy life with a younger wife and a stepson to rely on, but in the end, he was left with nothing. My uncle's stepson never once called him dad or even uncle. My second aunt never called him husband or dear, but always addressed him by his full name. Several years ago, my uncle wanted to divorce, as life with her was no different from being single, perhaps even worse. He had a wife, but he couldn't rely on her. When we, his relatives, advised him to divorce and take back his money and land, he was too afraid. He didn't want the shame of a public divorce trial at his age. Moreover, if he got sick, he would still have to depend on her. So, he kept enduring this miserable life. This past Dragon Boat Festival, while families were celebrating together, my uncle was home alone. We later found out that my second aunt and her son's family had gone on vacation without him, even asking him for 2,000 yuan to cover travel expenses. Seeing him alone and unwilling to leave the house, it was clear how miserable he felt. After investing so much money and energy into this remarriage, he was still left to live by himself. My uncle's remarriage, which he had imagined would be beautiful, turned out to be a nightmare. His experience is a cautionary tale for elderly people: don't rush into remarriage. If even young couples struggle to find happiness, how can elderly couples, who meet later in life, expect things to go smoothly? Who really loses when elderly people live together? You might not believe me, but I'm 68 years old. 3 years ago, my wife passed away due to illness. Since her passing, I've longed to find a good woman to spend the rest of my life with. One reason is that I've been incredibly lonely living alone. The other is that I don't know how to cook or do laundry, so I've been eager to find someone to help with these tasks. I was willing to offer financial support in exchange for this help. Soon after, I met Chenli, a woman 10 years younger than me, and we got together. She was very beautiful, but the only downside was that she had no pension. I didn't mind and told her that if she was willing to live with me and help with the cooking and cleaning, I would give her 3,000 yuan a month to ensure she lived comfortably. Chenli readily agreed, and the next day, she moved in with me. After moving in, Chenli lived a carefree life. She had no financial pressures and didn't need to cook elaborate meals, as I preferred simple dishes. However, her attitude toward me changed. She often spoke harshly, criticized me for my poor health, and frequently insulted me. Despite my efforts to accommodate her, she began complaining about everything. Though she wasn't contributing financially, she wasn't helping with the housework either. Most days, she spent her time shopping or visiting friends, while I was left at home, lonely and frustrated. I realized that although I had sought companionship, I ended up with more emotional burdens. When she didn't get her way, she threatened to leave, knowing that I was afraid of living alone. Every time I suggested we separate, she would shed tears and say she was just angry in the moment. She would then go back to her usual ways shortly after. This cycle repeated, and I was stuck in a relationship where I felt emotionally drained but unable to leave. After 2 years of this, I could no longer tolerate the constant arguments and lack of care. I decided to end the relationship. When I told her, she said she would leave, but not without taking the financial support I had promised. She demanded a significant amount of money, saying that I had wasted her time and efforts over the years. Eventually, I agreed to give her 50,000 yuan just to part ways. Through this experience, I realized that living together in old age can be much more complicated than expected. What I sought was companionship, someone to share the burden of loneliness, but what I received was more heartache and dependency. Many elderly people like me think that living with someone will solve all their problems, but they often find that it brings a new set of challenges. The challenges of remarriage in old age. Both my second uncles and my own experiences serve as cautionary tales for the elderly who consider remarriage or living together late in life. Here are a few lessons we've learned. 1. Financial security comes first. Whether it's remarriage or simply living together, money often becomes a major point of contention. Elderly people may think they're entering a relationship for emotional support, but financial dependence quickly complicates matters. One party may feel entitled to the other's resources, while the other may become resentful of the burden. This can lead to endless disputes over money, inheritance, or property. 2. Emotional compatibility is rare. Finding emotional compatibility in old age is challenging. After years of living independently or being in a previous relationship, habits are hard to change. Most elderly people have established ways of living, and adjusting to a new partner's quirks and demands is often more difficult than expected. Emotional fulfillment rarely follows. 3. Family tensions. In both cases, family conflicts played a significant role. When elderly people remarry, especially when children from previous marriages are involved, tensions are almost inevitable. The new spouse may not be accepted by the family, and competition for resources, property, or inheritance can create lasting rifts. 4. Loss of autonomy. Many elderly people feel they lose their autonomy in remarriage or live-in relationships. The desire for companionship can lead them into arrangements where they are no longer in control of their lives. Whether it's giving up financial control, making decisions for someone else's family, or losing the independence of living alone, elderly individuals often find themselves in a worse situation than before. Conclusion: proceed with caution. In the end, my second uncle, who rushed into remarriage, is still paying the price. I, on the other hand, have learned my lesson the hard way and now live peacefully on my own. While loneliness is hard to bear, it's preferable to the turmoil and emotional strain that comes from a poorly considered relationship later in life. I would advise all elderly people to think carefully before making any decisions about remarriage or cohabitation. What may seem like a solution to loneliness can often bring more trouble than it's worth. Alright, that's all for today's sharing. Thank you for watching. I hope today's content resonated with you. For those who haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click subscribe so we can accompany you every day. Let's grow together, be happy together, and slowly grow old together. See you next time.